Today I fucked up by accidentally teaching my roommate's parrot to sing Seabat. My roommate doesn't know yet. I am so dead. My roommate is out of town camping until the end of the weekend, and he's going to kill me when he finds out. Okay, so we all know the story with Seabat. No need to get into that. My roommate is out of town for a week, and I have the whole apartment to myself. 4 days ago, I, 29 male, asked my girlfriend, 29 female, if she would like to enjoy some delicious fun time while blasting Seabat. Her and I are both super weird and are open to doing this dumb kind of stuff. To no surprise, she laughed and said yes. I just thought it would be funny to experience. To my surprise, it really wasn't as weird as I thought it would be. It might be that the love I have for her is so powerful that it left only about 5% of my brain power focusing on the dolphin sounds in the background. The next day, we decided to go at it again, only this time, Seabat was a surprise for her. After a few minutes of kissing, I turned on the music, and we both started laughing hysterically before getting it on. I even lasted longer than 1 day before, which I now regret. Here's the problem which I stupidly did not even take a second to consider. While my roommate is out of town, I'm taking care of his parrot, who dwells in our living room, which shares a very thin door with my bedroom. This is no ordinary parrot. This is a chattering lory, same bird as a red one on the YouTube that goes, wee-oo, wee-oo, wee-oo. I don't know. This bird does not shut up. He makes so much noise that I've naturally learned to ignore him after a year of living with it. Anyways, somehow it never even crossed my mind that these parrots learn words and sounds and mimic them surprisingly accurately. Before leaving for work yesterday morning, I made some coffee and sat down in the living room for just a bit of relaxing and closing my eyes. All of a sudden, I hear the first few notes of Seabat in perfect pitch and rhythm. I open my eyes and this little dude is staring me dead in the face. 5 to 10 seconds pass and I hear it again. I just grabbed my things and left for work immediately. I had to escape, figuring I'd just find a way to fix this or explain this later. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that I'm just dead. My roommate isn't weird like me, and he hates when I say silly things to the bird. When he comes back this weekend, I'm worried he's going to give a notice and leave. Any advice on how to go about this would be greatly appreciated. I'm sweating as I'm writing this.
Oh my god.
And no, for privacy reasons, I will not be posting a video of the bird.
Oh my god. So how do you fix this? I would say start playing something else near the bird. Start playing some Taylor Swift. Am I the asshole for not allowing my son and his fiance in my house because they don't treat my wife like a grandma?
Okay.
So, my son, Mason, 25 male, got with his fiance pretty young. They were 18 at the time. Now, would I have agreed with this choice of his, especially for a kid who is in engineering in a top university? No, but he seemed happy, and that's what matters to me, just as long as he didn't forget about his studies and himself. My wife, on the other hand, didn't. She wanted him to do the same as our eldest 2 children did. No dating, just focusing on school and coming out with amazing grades. They had a big argument about not only his choice of dating, but his girlfriend, Tracy. Also, in brackets, nothing racist, my wife and his girlfriend are the same race, bracket. They barely argue, so this didn't hurt the relationship much, and they moved past it. What set it off was when Mason was able to qualify for an engineering program abroad. Me and my wife were obviously excited since this would be great for his future. He would come back at least once a month, and although we wished he'd spend more time with us, it was normal that he would spend that time with Tracy. Well, while he was still abroad, Tracy approached us and told us she was pregnant. I was excited, but my wife was cynical about the pregnancy and asked her straight up if it was Mason's. Tracy got offended and they argued. She got her parents involved who were all saying their daughter would never step outside of a relationship and that my wife just didn't want Mason to step up for his own kid. I told them that it was natural to get wary since Mason was barely home and we could all solve this with a DNA test when the baby was born. Tracy and her parents were against this idea, but after talking to Mason, he agreed, although he was a bit disappointed in his mom. Skip to 9 months later and a couple more weeks for the DNA test and the baby was his. My wife apologized and now just wants to move on. Tracy didn't. She said she didn't want my wife involved since she stressed her out during the pregnancy. And since she doubted her own granddaughter, she shouldn't get to be in her life. My wife was absolutely broken by this and kept asking for her forgiveness over and over again, but Tracy and Mason refused. It got to the point where she would cry herself to sleep, and it really broke me. I called Mason to tell him to come to his senses, that his mom was just worried about him and wanted to make sure that he wasn't trapped with a baby that wasn't his. He argued that she needed to hurt a little for the pain that she caused Tracy. What pain? She just didn't interact with Tracy until the baby was proven to be Mason. I called him dumb for allowing Tracy to continuously disrespect his mother like this. I told him that until he sees his mom like how a son should, he and Tracy are no longer welcomed in my house. This was her house too, more of the fact, since she stayed home and I won't have her feeling insecure in her own house. He got mad and threatened to keep my grandchild away from me, but at this point, I'm not going to be manipulated. I told him if he wants to cut me off and live happily ever after with Tracy and her family, he can do so. So I hanged up. He blocked me. I don't think what I did was wrong. My other kids are on my side, and Mason is just getting manipulated by Tracy and her family. My youngest, though, thinks I shouldn't have banned him from my house. So am I the asshole?
My husband is in the process of adopting my son, 5. We have a lawyer, we've drawn the paperwork, my son has his own guardian, and we have already had a meeting with that lawyer. We are fully in the process. At first, I felt guilt for this being our decision. Nothing against my husband, because his love for my son is unmatched. My ex was in my son's life for the first 3 years, unwavering. We split custody 50-50. However, I still solely was responsible for medical bills, visits, insurance costs, etc. We were co-parenting fairly well, but there were some scenarios we would butt heads, obviously. Then my ex went to jail, and since coming out, is only allowed supervised visitations per the state. He's allowed to make phone calls, he's allowed as many visits as permitted. I had zero issues with scheduling visits. However, I would not be making sole effort for this to be arranged. Not once have I been asked in 2 years if he could see his son. His mom has reached out to him and has planned things through them for his son, but again, it was never initiated by him, other than one Father's Day. My son would ask to call his dad, and it was hit or miss if he would get an answer. But again, it was not my son's job to make this effort. I begged, pleaded, and yelled for him to put forth more effort because my son is old enough to notice the effort wasn't there anymore. So I told him I no longer thought it would be beneficial to have any contact at all. I had a barely there dad, and that was more painful than an absent one. Realistically, since he's so young, he doesn't know the situation or scenario. Every time he asks if he can see his dad, I tell him he's working. I never speak badly about him, which honestly gets very exhausting. My son hasn't had much of a relationship with him for at least 1.5 years, but he still talks about him like he's in his life every day. My dad this, my dad that, and I'm always telling him things if he asks specific questions about him. A year ago, I brought up the idea of child support, just paying for insurance for him, $120 a month. He seemed to agree, but then months went by with no help. In this time, he bought 2 vehicles and a new phone. He had a whole new phone number and didn't tell me for months until he found out through the grapevine our son was sick with the flu. My husband asked if I would be comfortable with him adopting my son. At first, I said let's talk to a lawyer about child support. It wasn't about getting any extra income for myself. I just truly felt I was taking on the brunt of his well-being myself and was exhausted trying to keep up. New clothes, new shoes, daycare, insurance. My husband was stepping in to help as much as I would let him until I finally looked at the calendar to see how long it had been since my ex saw his son. In person, face to face, it had been 5 months. I asked if child support was something my ex was willing to do, and he's told me he would rather go back to jail than pay me child support. We started the adoption process shortly after. My son's only heard positive and beautiful things about his father. He wanted to go to the same school he went to. He wants things that are his favorite color. He wants to play games his father likes. He idolizes him. He does not want to be adopted. He said this on more than one occasion. He loves my husband. When he's not at school, he's going to work with him because he wants to. They're outside playing football together constantly. They're playing video games together. My husband's showing him at-home science experiments he thinks he will like. And my son's having a blast during all of these things. He asked my husband how his day at work was. He tells him how his day at school is. They have a relationship I did not have to initiate. They've always been so close. In the town we live in, having his last name would open opportunities for him. He's 5. Realistically, he does not know the brunt of the situation. So, do I hold off until he is old enough to make that decision? Or do we continue forward with the adoption?
I think that you just give him love and let your husband bond with him and they have the life. And if your son ever says, I want his last name, then the papers are there for him. He can sign them. But I would try to let him make that choice and that decision so he knows it's available to him and you're not forcing it. But there they are. When you're ready for it, you just sign your name to it and it will be so.
There is a little bit more info. Ideal outcome, maybe a clear mind moving forward. The paperwork has been filed. My ex has been served, so I'm not sure if moving backwards is an option. And then additional, my ex's jail time and charge has to do with a crime against a child. While I'm not 100% sure it happened, he was found guilty with zero evidence for or against him. Also, his parents are supportive of this decision and like the person my husband is. So that being said, there's no going back, it sounds like at this point.
Then you have to ride the roller coaster.
Am I the asshole for getting a restaurant worker fired?
Ooh.
I, 16 female, and my friend, 16 female, went out to dinner this weekend. We usually go to this restaurant that can get a bit pricey, but has affordable options too. We usually order as cheap as we can and split an appetizer. The check came out to $15 and I just left a $20 bill, so a $5 tip. My friends came out to the same and she left a $3 tip. We paid, left, and started walking through the parking lot to my car. The host, around 60 male, came out of the restaurant and yelled across the parking lot at us. We thought we'd forgotten something, so we turned around to talk to him, but we were kind of sketched out since it was dark outside and there weren't many people in the parking lot. He started raising his voice and getting angry about how we always leave shitty tips and that our waitress has a family to provide for. He told us that we can't afford to eat there if we can't leave a decent tip and kept getting louder and louder as he was talking. I told him that I was sorry, but that I thought our tip was okay, that I didn't realize we should have left more. I told him how much my bill was and how much I left, and he just kept shaking his head. I don't really remember how the conversation ended. I started getting very anxious, and my friend took over talking to him. He ended up going back inside, and we got into my car. Once we got in, I started crying. I know, kind of dumb, but it really freaked me out, and I couldn't stop shaking. I ended up calling my mom. She usually helps me feel better when I'm panicky, and I told her everything that happened. My mom got kind of upset at the whole situation, but helped me calm down and then told us to come home. She told my dad what happened, and by the time we got home, my dad had already called the restaurant and complained. I promise he's usually pretty relaxed and doesn't complain often. He's usually not a Karen. I'm not really sure what all my dad said, but the manager called him the next day and told him that they'd pulled the parking lot cameras, talked to the host, and talked to our waitress, and that they decided to fire the host. My sister, 18 female, keeps calling me and my friend assholes and said that I don't know what the real world is like, and he was an old man that depends on his paycheck. She said that I was being a baby and that I should have tipped more to make up for not ordering an expensive option. I feel really guilty that he got fired and this turned into such a big deal. I also feel guilty that maybe I don't tip enough when I go there and that I inconvenience the waiter and waitresses. I probably wouldn't have told my mom if I'd known it would turn into such a big thing. My parents keep talking about how the host should have known better, that we're teenage girls, and that you don't follow people out of the parking lot like he did. And I totally get their point of view, but I feel like I may have been too worked up when I called my mom, causing her to get worked up and made it into a bigger deal than I should have, and my sister was right. Was I an asshole for telling my parents? Or an asshole for not leaving a good enough tip? Am I the asshole?
Not in the slightest in any way.
Not the asshole.
Caught my wife's stepdad sniffing her underwear on the baby monitor. Am I overreacting? We're currently living out of state and my wife flew home to surprise her mom. She took our 10-month-old son with her. She called me and told me to look at the baby monitor that automatically turns on when it senses movement. I looked at the video she was talking about, and you can see her stepdad, who her mom married when she was 10, in her room. My wife is staying with her grandparents, her mom's parents, pick up a pair of pants with the underwear in them. She takes both of them off at the same time so the underwear stays inside the pants, holds them up to his nose, takes 3 big sniffs that you can actually hear on the monitor, and sets them down.
Oh my God.
This was an hour ago. I'm close to buying a plane ticket, flying there, and beating his ass. What should I do? She's telling her mom right now. And then there's an edit. Okay, so edit. My wife has convinced me not to beat his ass because of the legal troubles that could come. Unfortunately, they're on the other side of the country, and we don't have money to buy a plane ticket at the moment for me to be there. My mother-in-law is deciding what she needs to do, but is leaning towards leaving him. We have made it clear that we will love her no matter what, but we will not be near her husband ever again, especially with our children. I think that will convince her to leave. Unfortunately, again, they recently adopted a 10-year-old girl who was a family friend of theirs. That adds another difficulty to the situation. Thank you, everyone, for your advice in the situation. And then it says, my wife and mother-in-law have not confronted the stepfather yet, but are planning to do so tonight. I'll update on how that goes. We're trying to get another flight for my wife and son to come home, as they were planning to stay for another 2 weeks or so, but due to our financial situation, I'm not sure that'll happen. She doesn't feel like she's in danger, but I wish I could be there just in case.